Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart feel lonely and long for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, a constant friend.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Coffee Time Bible Study. We are here with Kaylee Duvall and Becky Minlick. How are you, Becky? How are you, Kaylee?
Doing good.
Good. We're also here with Zoom. Brother Stedman's with us on Zoom, and we thank him for being here.
How you doing?
We're doing good. Can you hear us good this morning?
Oh, really clear.
Okay, it's taken weeks to figure out these technical difficulties, but I think we might have mastered it. Becky, are you hearing us better?
What was that?
Are you hearing us any better?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not. You guys are super, super low.
Okay, so we're going to try to speak up for Becky today. She's having difficulty hearing us, but we're going to push through. This is Esther 2. We did Esther 1 last week, and we got off and we were talking on Zoom afterwards, like we always do. We chop it up on Zoom and said, we need to do more. We need to dive deeper into Esther because it's such a good book, and there's so many nuggets in Esther that we wanted to do a part 2. So with that, we can start to, we'll just give you a recap of last week. We talked about Esther and her journey from being an orphan all the way until she was queen, and how Mordecai took her under his wing, and Haman was the villain in our story where he tried to do a genocide against the Jewish people. And Esther, she was the person in the right place at the right time, in the right position, and she was able to fast and pray with her people and to get the king to change his mind and change his decree to save her people. And that kind of summarized Esther's from last week.
Yes.
And Becky, you had some things that you wanted to add, and I want to give you that opportunity. So even though you can't hear us, we can hear you. So
Okay, perfect.
yeah, go ahead. And I know you've been studying hard, and I'm anxious to hear what you got.
Okay, so I will start with, I guess, kind of recapping over a little. This story is about a Jewish girl who gets elevated to princess and queen in a pagan court. But God has her there for a very specific season and for a really particular reason. She doesn't know it until the story unfolds, but she will discover in the normal, accurate occurrences of life what God wanted her to do. Without the book of Esther, he wanted to know, without the book of Esther, we wouldn't know what life was like for the Jews when they were left behind in Babylon. Now, also what's in this book, there's no reference to God. There's no reference to prayer. There's no reference to faith. There's no reference to the law of Moses. No New Testament writer ever quoted this book. Also, it is not found among the biblical scrolls of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So the beauty of this book is that God the beauty of this book is God is overly in the book. So we get to see God, his character. We get to see his character unfold through each person. And there was something said, and it was quoted by a man by the name of John Nelson Darby. He said, God's ways are behind the scenes. He moves all the scenes, but is behind them. So he's like, he's there and he's moving everything and molding everything. And he's there, he's present, but you don't hear about him. You don't see him like that. Like it's not, wow, God, like every other book. So I thought that was beautiful. That's where I thought that we needed to mention him. Because God is in the book, but you won't find his name, but you'll find a character, and the characteristics of providence. You will see that'll be huge. A very important thing, God's providence is different. There's no like miraculous, it's not like miraculous, basically, is what I'm trying to say. It's not like when manna fell from the heaven. It's not like when he parted the Red Sea, it's nothing like that. In providence, God takes the natural and uses it supernaturally. And it's like everyday decisions for us. What we go through every day, those are our everyday affairs that we can see God moving through our life and shaping us to do certain things, but for God's glory. And we don't even know it at the time, and we'll be being used, and it's an awesome thing. So I wanted to dig in more into providence. That was my biggest thing, because I think that was missed last week, and to see how we can see him do this, in the natural, the supernatural, and how he worked in the story of Esther. So if you have anything, do you have anything that you want to bring up in regards of providence and what you saw? Or would you like to start from where we left off and then see the providence through there?
Go ahead. I'm listening to you, Becky. Go
Okay.
ahead, explain what providence is, God's providence. I have my notes on it, but go ahead and we'll just chime in with you. So
Okay.
you did your study, you go right ahead. I'm fine listening to what you have. The only thing I would like to say is there was prayer in the book of Esther where she asked the the Jewish people, to fast and pray with her before she went into the king. So they did that for 3 days. So, but you're right, God is not mentioned anywhere in the book of Esther. But yeah, let's get into God's providence and how he works and how he operates, even in the small little minute things. He's still operating in God's will and for his purpose. So yeah, go ahead. I'm anxious to hear what you got.
Okay. I've got so much inside of this. So we spoke, I mentioned last week, chapters 1 and 2 are supernatural providence. Chapters 3 and 5 are satanic plottings, and 6 through 10 are his sovereign protection. So what I was getting from, they're all recited at different, I'm sorry, that was way wrong. I didn't want to talk about that because that is not something that I thought was very important. Okay, so the first book, we've got them celebrating 180 days.
Yeah.
So we got a 6-month celebration. Now, this 6-month celebration was for a war plan. That's what scholars have said. That's what scholars believe this was. It was a big party, so that way they can get their troops, they can get he ruled over certain little parts of all over. So he brought all these people that he ruled over because he needed a war plan. And he was kind of like wooing them, and talking to them and making this all about them so they could feel special. But in hindsight, he was, developing a war plan. Um, there was, there were six, I think it was 6 states that he governed. And those are the little 6 states that he had control of that were there. So just so you get kind of a visual of this and go from there. So there, Philip Macedon had a son, and his name was Alexander. They called him Alexander the Great. And he was great. He really was. So this great Alexander, he took over the world, and that is what he was very good at. So he put pockets of Greece culture all over the world. He will build road systems and this time. And I say this because I have a point at the end. This is information, so that way you'll understand how things came about. This is why I bring up Alexander. So he put pockets of Greece's of system later on to be expanded on by the Romans. By the time of the New Testament, the world speaks a common language, and the gospel can travel on this network of roads built by the Romans and started by the Greeks. All the gospel can travel by the precise language, the Greek language. So that is why I say that. That's how Greek came about inside the word. They like to push things, so they do. And you'll see God standing behind the scenes. The Greeks think that they're taking over, but God is behind all this, and he opened those roads. He's the one that made all of this possible, not the Greeks, not the Romans, not any king, not even the one that's trying to plot all these to fight against the Greeks. So I thought that was awesome when I found that out, because I don't think that we know how deep God goes and how deep he works in good and bad people.
Yeah.
It don't matter if they're good or bad. He's going to use them for whatever he wants his glory to be in the long run. So I thought that was huge. I thought that was beautiful, and I couldn't not share it.
Yeah,
So,
no matter how little or no matter how little or how big, God's got his hand in it, and it's according to his plan, whether it's good or bad. Yes. So
absolutely.
Keep going.
Absolutely. So I will go into, we talked about Haman, and Haman was an, how do you say it? He was a Agagite.
Yeah.
Weird name. Me and Lily, I mean, we watched our Bible study, and we laughed every time because he would say, I'm an Agagite. Like, what a name for a person. So that was Haman's background. Now, why does the Holy Spirit think that bringing this is important about him being an Agagite? Okay, I said it right finally.
Yep.
Why does the Holy Spirit think that's important? Well, the Holy Spirit wants he wants you to see how far back disobedience goes. So when we go back, we go to the book of Samuel, and 1 Samuel 15. King Saul gave command to spare the king Agag. Who do you think King Agag is? King Agag is very much so in relations to Haman. part of their tribe, the Agagites. So that's where that comes in. And when that comes in, it shows that Samuel chose to keep the king and not kill him and keep certain things. Remnant of the Agagites was able to get away because Saul was just very negligent in that fight. So there was a lineage of history that leads up to Haman. So I'm sure that they spoke. Haman knows the stories of Samuel and what has happened, and there is a brewing of hatred towards Jews in that instance for Mordecai. He doesn't like Mordecai. So that though he doesn't know he's a Jew, there's something about him that he does not like. So he cannot stand him, and this is why he wants to kill him. But the point is, all the way back to that, even God knew way back in Samuel, it's coming into the future. And the future is bringing these. Esther's not there by coincidence.
No.
She's there for a huge reason. And it goes and it stems back like history, not only in biblical, but historical history. It's shown, and you can't deny it. You can't deny God's providence. His hand is in it up until that point, to show us and reveal himself and his character in this book of Esther. And I thought that was awesome.
And it's because of their disobedience back then with King Saul that we are at the position that we're at with Esther's story. So yes, go ahead.
Yep. So this Haman guy said that 10,000, he was going to give 10,000 talents of silver, which was a third of the entire revenue of the Persian Empire. Now, where was he going to get this money from? I mean, Haman doesn't have money like that. So where was he going to get the money from? Well, how better else than to kill all of the Jews and get their plunder, and there is your 10,000 talents of silver, which would be a third of the entire revenue of the empire. And that is like his plan in the back of his head, to get this money and be like, okay, I got it, but I got it because it's because of the blood of the Jews and all their stuff, all their things and money. So I was like, wow, that was like huge for me. I thought that was super huge because Haman didn't have a dime.
Let me clarify that, Becky. I know you can't hardly hear, but let me clarify. That was the king's first decree, was that they could kill the Jews and take their plunder. So that's what you're talking about. The first decree that the king Xerxes sent out to the nation. So keep going. Yep. Okay,
are you done? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
So the first decree, yes, you clarified that so that way the people know. Thank you very much, Susan, for that. I appreciate it. Yep. Yes, it was because of the decree, and that's what he did. Is he was sneaky, he was very sneaky, and made sure he got that stamp from that ring to go out, and that way all, I guess, not even the earth, but as close to it as you can, for them to kill the Jews from all over, like a genocide. That was his goal. That was what he wanted. That's his hatred for the Jews, was that because of that history. So he wanted them all wiped out. Plus, he was going to make a real pretty penny, and it was going to make him look very, very good in front of the king. So he would have a good life as well. So I thought that was very interesting. And I was like, well, I didn't know that 10,000 talents was a third of the entire revenue of Persia. I did not know that. That's a lot of money. You're talking about a lot of money. So it's not only the people that are here on earth that want to take over empires like that for the love of money. You know, that greed is huge for people in general. That's why it says, you know, we can only serve two gods, God or money. So obviously the money was good, you know, had he got rid of the Jews. So yeah, that was super important. The Persians were very much so for money. They loved their money. So we got anti-Semitism legalized, basically. So that's what he got legalized when that stamp on that ring was put on, and that decree was sent out. So anti-Semitism for a genocide is basically what he got, you know, for himself. And I thought was not very nice, but as we read on, we will see. Now we're going into satanic strategy. So as we go into satanic strategy, it's God's plan of redemption, and it requires the existence of a nation and the continuance of a nation. If you can destroy that nation, you can throw God's purpose. You could thwart God's purpose. So as the devil knows, if God's born and he's the one to plunder him and cut him off and all that. How do you stop that? Well, he's going to kill all his people. He's going to have somebody with that mindset to go out and kill all his people. And so I thought that's why you see all the anti-Semitic attacks there in history. And biblical and also, you know, historical. They're there, the well, I can't say that word very well. So I'll leave it as it is. That's why that was out there. Post-biblical, you know, history, all parts of Satan's attempts to overturn the promise of God. So he did his best. He was trying his best to stop what God has already started, and he could not. And that is the beauty of this book, that we see God's providence working, you know, in the natural, supernaturally. And it's just a wave of beautiful things that he's doing. So from there, I kind of went into it was the queen. The queen, there's a part in there, I think it was four, I can't remember the verse. But there was a part where Mordecai is telling her, you are here for a reason. This is what, I don't know what it is, because they weren't really in God's, in his, what's the word I'm looking for? They were not really, like, it's not faithful. The word that I'm looking for is, it's almost like they weren't in the faith. They weren't in the faith. They didn't study it. Huh?
They didn't practice.
There you go. They didn't practice. That's the word I was looking for. They didn't practice the law of Moses. You know, it was kind of a thing since they were in Babylon, Persia, you know, since they were there, they were more accustomed to those ways. So the faith part, the, you know, all the things that we know and we believe, they didn't have that. But they felt it. They felt it, because when she said, I'm going to go into the king, because in those days you couldn't go just up to the king. In those days, the men and women were separated when they ate. You know, there's so many laws and rules that the Persians had, because back then people wanted to kill the king. They couldn't just let anybody in. They don't know if it's a setup. They don't know if that person is trying to kill them. So when she said, I don't know if I'm going to die or not, but if I do, it is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it. Back in time, there was even a point in the White House where people would be asleep in the White House, corridors. It wasn't such a distress, to have somebody there. It wasn't crazy, mad where they thought they were going to go in and kill the president. And in these times, they were terrified. Like, people really were trying to take them out. So when Mordecai tells her, I don't know how or why you're here, but he even believed that there's a force. You don't know from where, but there's a force that's going to help her. And whether she dies or not, he believed that something was going to get done, no matter what. So that was the beauty of them not having that belief, because they forgot, a majority, because in that time, Jews were not supposed to be married to pagans.
Right.
That's something that was like a big no-no. So when Mordecai went in allowed, he's Jew, he knows he's Jew, she's Jew. When that was allowed, and he offered that, hey, go in there and let's try this. He knew that he was a Jew, and it was unheard of. It should not have been done. It was against the law of Moses.
Yeah.
So, there was some sort of belief, but they kind of forgot where they came from. They forgot everything that they had been taught and what they know. So, but in the back of his mind, when he told Esther that's where that part came up for me. And I can see God moving even in that little instance of that tiny part of not knowing if you're going to live or die, but still having that leap of faith. And that's where you see faith come in. Though they don't talk about it, that's the part where you see faith. That's the part where we can all see faith, in that little short clip it, as well as I guess you could say, like, obedience at the same time. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to be obedient, and I'm going to do what I need to do, because I know somewhere inside something's going to happen, whether I live or die. So I thought that was absolutely beautiful. I couldn't get away from that part. That verse in chapter 4, it was just very huge for me, that part of faith. And we see that later on in Esther, when the plot starts thickening with all that, we see his sovereign protection. We definitely see that. We see that he is
in full control.
Yes.
Kaylee,
Yes.
did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, I was just saying the verse that she's referring to is chapter Esther 4, verses 12 through 14.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and read that for us, Kaylee, if you would?
Esther 4, verse 12. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back his answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?
Yep, she was in the right place at the right time, in the right period of time. God had placed her there. So keep on going, Becky. We're with you.
What was that?
Keep on going. We're with you.
Okay, I could barely hear you, so I wasn't even sure if she was done reading it. So
Yes.
we see God's sovereign protection and we see what he's done. And they do not know, yet that she's Jewish. They don't know that Haman's Jewish. Mordecai's Jewish. Haman doesn't know that Mordecai is Jewish. So when we get to um, where she reveals, it is like the best day ever. Like I can just sit back and I'm just like, it's a game of chess. It's a human game of chess with real kings and queens. You know what I mean? Like God's here and Satan's here, and he's like, check. I got Haman, and God's like, checkmate. I got Esther. Like,
Yep.
like I gotcha. Lero, like that's what we say in Spanish. Lero is like, haha. Lero, I got you. Um,
Yep.
I thought that was the most beautiful thing for how God moved the queen to reveal to the king that she's a Jew. She's one of them. She's
Mhm.
one of them, and Satan thought that he had the upper hand. He really did, and he did not, because God had Esther that whole time. He knew from way back when in Samuel, how
Yeah.
things were going to play out up to this part. And
Yeah.
all of that was the natural and supernatural,
Yep.
like his fingers are like weaving and all of that. I thought that was so, so beautiful.
Yeah. And Sister Becky, that's why we cannot think that uh God's not in full control during our lifetime, because he's been in control all this time, like you say, weaving in and out in the background, doing all the things that need to be done to put into place his plan and his will. And we are just one of those pawns in the chess set, in the chess game. And we've got cannot think that God is not in full control when he throughout history has been weaving in and out and in full control all along throughout these stories that we've been saying as we go through the women of the Bible. He's been in full control all along, and he's been in the background. And this is just another story of how he operates and how he is moving in the lives of all the people, not just the women of the Bible, but all the people of the Bible, working to fulfill his plan and his will, because his will be done. Just as Jesus was on the cross and died for all the people, similar to how Esther was going there for her people. She wasn't going there for herself, but for her people. Jesus died on the cross for his people. So the story is great how it intertwines, and it just shows the glory of God. And go ahead, Sister Becky, keep going, because I know your spirit is full of this story, and I want you to get it out.
I just thought that was awesome. I just thought I can see everything in what he's doing. He's not mentioned at all. That's like the hugest thing ever, that he's not mentioned, but he's seen. He's seen. His character is seen. And like you said, it don't matter what you do. God's hand is in all of our lives. And we can bring that back to us when we think or doubt ourselves in any way, shape, or form. Don't think that God's not using us or God's not using someone else, that is going to be huge for us in our life or huge for somebody else's life. That he's always working, though we don't see it in that moment. Like Esther and Mordecai didn't see it, they didn't know, but they believed it. So it's up to us, to see the supernatural and the natural. And we have eyes and ears to see, but when we don't and we doubt, know that he's still there. He's
Yeah.
still there.
You've heard that it's in the details. He's in all the details, small or great. God is in all of those details and making it work to the glory of God. Period.
Yeah.
It's his plan, it's his will, and his will be done, just like Jesus on the cross. Lord, if you can take this cup from me, take this cup, but it be your will be done. Jesus knew it on the cross. Jesus knew it as he was preparing for the cross, that his will be done. And just in our lives, God's will be done.
Absolutely. So we get to the part of Esther and everybody having to fast. They have got to fast and they have got to pray. And she could have called all her girls from the palace. She could have called all her friends and homies from everywhere. She could have called everybody. But she said, the Jews, I need the Jews to fast and pray. Somewhere in there, though they didn't follow God's ways, she knew that there was a connection. There had to be a covenant connection with them and God. She had to know that. There's no way, because she specifically said the Jews. She didn't call anybody else. Just food for thought.
Becky, I'm going to stop you for a minute. Esther's story correlates with Jesus so much. Jesus interceded for his people. Esther is interceding for her people. So I just wanted to make that point, that there's so many correlations and foreshadowing that's going on between Esther and Jesus and what they did for their people. I'm not putting Esther on the same level as Jesus, don't get me wrong, but
right.
She was interceding for her people. Go ahead.
Absolutely beautifully said. Perfect. And that she was, without even knowing the part that she was playing. And that's the beauty of watching the supernatural and the natural. And that is exactly what was happening in that moment. And there goes that word of providence again. Like, it is just there. Providence was huge throughout this book. They all fasted. They all prayed. It was the most beautiful and leap of faith that they had, plus obedience and everything you could possibly think of that God asks of us, all in a nutshell, that they did for them to have the glory at the end, that nobody was hurt. That decree ended up going out. No one was hurt. She didn't die, because she would have been part of that death. So would have Mordecai, and nothing happened. Nothing happened to anybody. And that was God's hand in that story. I can't help but go back to Mordecai, because we all know that Mordecai had said something because he had heard what was going to happen. He heard what was going to happen, so he said something, and it was noted in that book. And for us, we think our faith, like Mordecai, oh, I did this good deed, I helped the king, and he got, not bombarded because I opened my mouth, but it was recorded. It was definitely recorded. And later on, that helped, and he got rewarded, though it wasn't in that very moment. It wasn't in that moment. It happened later, but it happened rather here on earth or in heaven. I see and I hear and I feel that nothing is going to be, without a reward. So those of you that see and hear and you're like, man, when am I ever going to catch a break? Your break's coming. It's
Mhm.
just not right now. So pay attention to even Esther. Esther, the same thing. She didn't know she was going to become queen. She had no clue. It was like 1 in a million of this beauty contest, that she won and she got it. And she wasn't even believing of what's to come, but somewhere in there that was embedded in her. So though we don't believe at times, did you want to say something, Sister Susan? Go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to make another correlation of the king when Esther approached the king. When she approached the king had the scepter, right? And this
Yes.
scepter meant that if he, put this scepter out, you could die from it, right? If you presented yourself, you could. It was either death or he showed his scepter. I want to correlate that to God's mercy. When we approach the king,
Beautiful.
when we approach God, he's extending his mercy, just like
Yes.
King Xerxes is extending that scepter. So there's so many correlations between God and Jesus and Esther and the king, that if you really, really read deep into this story, you can see God working, like you say, Sister Becky, God working in the midst, God working in the plans, but also look at the correlation between the stories and the mercy that is given. And it just allows us to understand that God is in full control, and to approach him, he's giving us that mercy to be able to approach him, and to we have to have that faith like Esther, that we're willing to die for this, for our salvation, to come to God and be accepted, but it's by his mercy that we are. So there's so much to this. So keep going, sis.
Yeah, no, there is definitely a lot to this that you can take, and you can read this book over and over and still find something new, because it holds so much in it that I don't think you'll in any book of the Bible, but speaking on this one specifically, without the mention of God and faith and the law of Moses, all that, none of that is mentioned in this book. You're going to see God's hand all through it, and how he guides and moves everybody, good and bad. They're all being shaped and molded from many, many centuries and years back, up until this point, that you can see his hand, and it's going to show you something different every single time, but you will always see his hand moving through it, and the supernatural and the natural. That's what you're going to see through that. And that's what we need to remember in our own lives, the
Yes.
supernatural being natural, and having, even if you don't see it and he doesn't want you to see it in that moment, but know it's happening. Know that these things are happening, and they're working for the greater good of God. They're not
Yeah.
always for you. Go ahead, Sister Susan. Do you want to say something?
No, that's exactly right. It's for the, I was agreeing with you. It's for the
Okay.
good, for the good of God. It's for his
Yes.
plan, his glory. So we have to put that into perspective when we're worrying about all these little small, minute details of things that are preventing us from just totally surrendering to him. We've got to understand that his plan, it's his plan, his will. But I want to tell us a few lessons, and I think this is going to align with what you've been saying, Sister Becky.
Okay, go for it.
There's lesson one. These are there's many lessons. I just made some that I researched and looked at. God has a plan for our lives. That's lesson 1. We can read that all. We just, Kaylee just read it in Esther 4:12 through 14. God has a plan for each and every one of our lives, not just Esther's, not just the high priests, not just the King Xerxes. Every one of them had a plan in God's, had a position in God's plan. So God has a plan for our lives. We've got to understand that. Lesson 2, we are given divine moments to alter circumstances as believers. We don't believe things that are coincidental or by chance or by fate. That none of that matters. If you're thinking that way, you're thinking wrong, because it is God's divine interventions and positioning that gives us those plans of God. We just have to understand and be open to let him guide and direct our lives. Lesson 3, we must stand with courage and walk in faith. And this is what you were saying, Sister Becky, about Esther. She stood in courage and she stood by faith. So that's lesson 3. Lesson 4, fasting and prayer brings clarity, hope for deliverance. So there's a reason for the fasting and the prayers in our life. It's not to be taken lightly. It is to get clarity of God's plan. Lesson 5, God demands our obedience. Going back to King Saul and Samuel, because they were disobedient with the king Ag, which is the Egamite, same as Haman. This brought forth a chain reaction of things that created this whole thing that had to be corrected once again. And we've been learning all the way through the passing from the coming out of Egypt, going over through the judges, through the kings. We've been walking through the same process of this going over and over and over, and having to be corrected because of the disobedience. So lesson 5 is God demands our obedience. And when we don't, it affects other people. We've studied that in a previous study. Our disobedience affects other people and causes a chain reaction that God it does not want. So then he has to correct. He has to bring it back into alignment. Lesson 6, God uses everything and everybody for his divine purpose. God allowed these things to happen, and he's allowing things to happen, but no, at the end result is the good of God, the greater good and the bigger picture that God is in control. Those were the lessons that I wrote down on Esther, but there is many, many more as we talked about with Esther. So go ahead, Sister Becky. We are with you, and we encourage you to go ahead with anything else that you would like to express.
I mean, for me, that was what I got at the end of the day. The lessons you gave were perfect. They're perfect. I didn't put them into words like that. It was needed for clarity. So I thank you so much for that, because that was actually needed. I more so, this is coffee time with Sister Susan and Sister Kaylee. So I'd like to talk a little bit. I wanted to leave enough space and room to get Kaylee's thoughts, on this and what she got from it. That's what I wanted to do, at least for the last small part. Let's have a conversation about it. What do you ladies think? What did you get from it, Kaylee?
Had to unmute here. Well, I got that just because it doesn't mention, a lot about prayer or God, or even like the worshiping of other gods and all that stuff. Of course, I don't think that doesn't mean that she didn't have her own personal like prayer life or whatever. Um that's all skeptical either in either direction. Because to be a Jew, right, it's not a an ethnicity, right? It's not like
Mhm.
you're German, or like it's a usually it's around a religious um understanding, right, or brought up in that culture, which is why you're considered a Jew. So which explains why she would go to the Jewish people, because they would understand or know what fasting is and what praying is. Like, so I think that culture may have been there. I think it might have been more on the secretive side, because she didn't want anyone to know she was a Jew. But as we all know, we can pray silently, to ourselves or whatever. Um, so I think she had a faith. I think she was following, um, I think the Holy, well, I'd have to look if at this time if the Holy Spirit was released or whatever. Anyway, um, I think she had a faith. I think it may have been just on the secret side, since she was told to not let anyone know she was Jewish. Um, and like I said, the Jewish is more wrapped around um a belief system for the most part, like, is why you're called, you consider yourself a Jew. um I think was very brave and willing to die for um her people, and her uncle, was it her uncle, right, or
Mhm.
cousin,
Yeah.
for her cousin, right, like they came up with this plan. And so I believe she was very, very brave, and clearly um beautiful. So we all know that God puts people where they need to be, and appoints the um like the kings and the presidents and all that
Mhm.
stuff, right, for a time. So that king um that uh chose her clearly was attracted to her. So out of all of the virgins and stuff, right, Esther was chosen. um so
Yeah.
that may have been his greatest accomplishment, was he was put there solely for that time to pick Esther. And God made her to I can't think of the word, like, to be part of what he fancies, right? So that she was chosen, because
Yeah.
another king
Yeah.
may not have chose her, right? Different hair color, or whatever it would have been. um And so, um, yeah, I mean, it's just like you said, with, I mean, in any of the books of the Bible, you can see God work and where people were positioned and put, um, in their order of timeline, and so, um, yeah, I mean, like I said,
You
I've
got
only
what you
ever
got.
known, yeah, I mean, I've only ever known Esther as, like the Veggie Tales version of Esther, let she's just so pretty, and, she
Oh,
saved,
wow.
the Jews, and never really understood like how she saved the Jews, like, um yeah, Esther's just not one that I really ever studied. I mean, I have literally a whole study book just on Esther. Haven't
Yeah.
done it yet. So, um I have had plans because
Kaylee, you are so childlike then. You're coming in very much so childlike because you're really relearning. So for you to recap that,
Yeah.
wow, and know that you've only known it from VeggieTales, like that's like I love coffee time Bible study because it just really is a beautiful thing because
Well,
we've got
so
a seasoned teacher, with a childlike, daughter, and you're doing your thing. Look at God's hands are all in this because Kaylee doesn't know like that, but you do, Sister Susan. You know what I mean? And he's using you, and now because I didn't know that.
mm,
I thought you knew the word. For me, on the outside looking in, I thought my thoughts were, okay, you're Susan's daughter, a little bit, but come to find out, you're coming in like a child to relearn and
yeah.
learn what you don't know,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
that is
I've only
beautiful.
technically we've been saved for like 12 years. It was when I was pregnant with my second. And during that time, right, I was raising 4 children. And so my understanding and studies were very minimal. It was like just going to church and learning what was at the sermon. My husband on the other end blew through it like he was on a snowmobile, like just, going through the stuff, did all the studies, was absorbing everything. The pastors like took him under his wings. They would give him like a book this size or a little bigger and have him read it and give them their thoughts on, give them his thoughts on it. So it would be like a commentary on like Luke, right? And he would just blow through it, talk with them. And so he went up and up. He is now I call him a substitute pastor, and he preaches at our
Okay.
church when he's given time to preach. I mean, he preached the Christmas Eve sermon. So like he's very
Aw.
knowledgeable. He reads everything and absorbs it, retains it, understands it, um, believes it, studies. I mean, he does a lot. My life was spent raising
Amen.
our children. And so with
Okay.
raising my children was doing veggie tales, teaching at church, handling the kids in the nursery, you
Right.
know, reading the little Bible stories at night, every Christmas reading the Christmas story through all, through through the books of the Bible. Um doing like the Christmas play at church. Like that has been my last 12 years of my religion, we'll say, right? And so I'm
Gotcha.
in different ministries at church. I deal with unplanned, teen pregnancies and stuff and
Mm.
minister to them. Like we do tons of stuff. It's just my full knowledge is a lot of it is hearing what my husband has to say or reading and
Mhm.
asking him a question and getting a full 45-minute sermon on a question. So if I don't have time to ask him a deep question, I just kind of keep it to
Yeah.
myself or try to study. And then I have, like books and books of studies. And I mean, we have a whole library since, my husband, it's huge. I can send you pictures. But I don't read. I don't
Right.
I don't enjoy it. I don't have
She's like, I
fun.
don't read.
I don't. I get distracted. I don't know if I have ADHD or autism or what, but I'll be reading and all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, oh yeah, let me make my to-do list and then I'm doing that and then I start
Gotcha.
this and do that. So my aspect of studying, this is helpful because it keeps me accountable. It's the same time every week, same day of the week. I can do this, but to do the stuff on
Amen.
my own is very hard for me. So um my idea was to do the women of the Bible because I thought it would be, somewhat interesting and like catch my attention, right? Like Revelation was too much for me. I'm like, I'm sorry, but this is not, I can't. I just can't. So uh like so that's where I'm at.
Gotcha.
So I want, I want to learn more. I want to learn what I can. Um I don't want to be a parrot I don't want to regurgitate things that I've just heard, or I want to know 100% that I believe what I'm saying, which is a lot of the times why I don't talk a lot on here, because I want to make sure if I'm saying something, I 100% believe it. Or that's part why I will mention, like, this is my opinion, or this is what I believe to be true. Like, I'm not pushing my thoughts on anybody or saying that it's fully true, if I don't know for sure, right? But yes,
Right.
mainly I am here to learn, and to learn more of the background, the history of the stuff. Like, I may know the concept of the story, but not from
Mhm.
reading it from the Bible in its full, like the full book, to know the story. You know what I'm
Gotcha.
saying? So,
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah.
And
So,
and
Yeah.
Coffee Time Bible Study, we give God all the glory. This has nothing to
Amen.
do with us. God has put this Coffee Time Bible Study together the way that He planned it, not the way that we planned it. And we are just being
Mhm.
obedient each and every week. And I praise God for this fellowship time, this learning time, this time with my daughter, time with my brothers and sisters. And I just give God all the glory and all the praise for Coffee Time Bible Study. So we want to thank you for being here this week. I hope, Becky, that you were able to get everything out that you wanted to get out for Esther. I hope you
I did.
I hope you keep digging in Esther and keep going with all of the Bible stories and the women of the Bible. And I hope that
Mhm.
everyone enjoyed Esther Part 2. And we'll see you next week, Tuesday at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. And we are live on Facebook and YouTube. And we'll see you next week. Bye bye.